let me start with the next, perhaps most realistic punishment we can inflict, and that is a full oil embargo on Russia. Where are you on this? Is it something that's gaining some traction?
Well, I support a full oil embargo, even though it would equate to about, if it's just the U.S. alone, about 4% of Russian sales globally. But I think it is an important step to make, and I think it is gaining traction. And I think that, the president will have to look to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and other measures to offset any domestic challenges. But look, a evil, horrible war needs some dramatic actions. And so I think this is one of many that can be taken.
I don't know how much you were able to watch our previous segment. Sort of, we now see what the Russian military strategy is, and it's the initial strategy didn't work. This one is going to be costlier for him, but perhaps more violent, more messy, more bloody. Senator, it's going to be hard to sit here and watch, is it not? And to watch a slaughter, to watch that convoy and do nothing about it. I get the fears. Is there anything you think we should be doing more that you think folks are too hesitant to try?
Well, listen, $10 billion of both defensive lethal equipment added on to the $1 billion of just defensive lethal equipment that we've supplied to Ukraine is a huge boost to the Ukrainians' ability to fight at the end of the day. I think we strategically have to think about the West as well. We need Zelensky to be safe because as we face the challenges of Kyiv, we need to have a government that we can work with in the days ahead. And so looking at the West and how we protect that line of assistance is important. I see a lot of the bombing, the indiscriminate bombing, including on civilian targets, notwithstanding what the Russians say. They are targeting civilian targets, residences, hospitals, and other key areas, are coming from ballistic missiles. So in terms of the question of airspace, that won't necessarily stop cruise and other missiles that the Russians have and have been using in this regard. So I think we need to get this $10 billion passed. We need to get the aid to them. And I have been approving, as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee that has jurisdiction over arms sales and arms transfers from other countries that we have sold to, I have been approving it as quickly as they send it to me.
How are we getting, are you convinced we're going to be able to continue to actually get these weapons into the hands of Ukrainians? It looks like we really only have one way to do it, right? Through Poland, through the West.
That's basically our transit point now. And that's why, speed is of the essence, because the more that we can put in the Ukrainians' hands, then the more that they'll have both to take the fight to the Russians, as well as to impede the process of any decision of the Russians to move towards the West to cut that transit line. So time is of the essence, and that's why I strongly support the administration's call for the $10 billion. It's further than what was originally thought, but from every estimate I've heard from both the humanitarian side and the defense side, it's an appropriate number.
When it comes to if we do this oil embargo, and it does seem like there's a growing number in Congress that would like to see it happen, a lot of Republican members say it should be in conjunction with a sort of opening up of more exploration here. Where are you on that? And is there a line where you think, yeah, maybe we should expand some production for a short period of time of fossil fuels? Where are you on this?
Well, look, I don't think one hinges on the other. I hope my Republican colleagues aren't saying we should stop Russian oil only if we have more exploration. That would be pretty outrageous. So I think we should stop Russian oil. Now, how the president chooses to meet the challenge of that percentage of Russian oil that equals the entire oil of the United States that it imports is a question for him to decide, whether he opens up more of the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, whether he gets allies that are oil-producing nations to step up to the plate, or whether he permits some increased domestic production on lands that are already in production.
Senator, big picture here. For now, it looks like none of this has had an impact on the Russian government, right? Putin is more defiant, right? He seems to be more intent on trying to strike back, and he may be reacting emotionally. It isn't easy to see how this ends. Do you have a sense of where this goes next? And do you have a sense of where Putin's, what is being shared with you about Putin's his persona these days?
Well, Chuck, I disagree with you a little bit that it hasn't hurt the Russians. They're hurting mightily. A friend of mine passed through the airport, and on the exchange rates where you can exchange currency, right, and the ruble's being bought at zero. The reality is that their reserves abroad are frozen. He needs those reserves to continue his war. You have long lines of Russians trying to get their money out. Believe me, their sovereign debt has been reduced by the major rating agencies to junk bond. This is having a real consequence to him. Now, whether he is continuing willing to accept all of those consequences on behalf of the Russian people in order to pursue his goal of taking Ukraine and extending to what was the Soviet Union as much as possible, that's another question. But it isn't that he isn't being hurt. He may be willing to take the pain, but more importantly, the Russian people are taking the pain. As to his mental status, look, he has been clustered largely for the last 2 years. COVID was supposedly the reason, but I don't think there's anybody telling truth to power there about what's really happening in the field, what's happening among the Russian people, and eventually that's got to blow through.